It's time to take 5 for safety. It's time for another episode of Let's Not Die Today on the Toolbox Talk Show Network.
Okay, folks, I'm just going to say it. Compliance training is boring. No one wants to do it. The courses are long. They're frustrating. No one likes them. There is a solution. 7taps.com. It's micro-learning made easy. Have your HR department go there, try it out for free. If they like it, get the pro version. But before they buy, there's a whole bunch of bonuses they can get by going to toolboxtalkshow.com/training. Our topic today, well, I'm not real sure. It's a little confusing. MEWP AWP. Hey, let's just make this as confusing as possible. Aerial lift, aerial work platform, or mobile elevated work platform. What is an AWP or MEWP or an aerial lift? With these acronyms, it can get pretty confusing. Today, we will discuss ways to stay safe when working with these machines, no matter what you call them. Let's start with definitions. An aerial work platform, AWP, also known as an aerial device, elevating work platform, EWP, cherry picker, bucket truck, or mobile elevating work platform, MEWP, is a mechanical device used to provide temporary access for people or equipment to inaccessible areas, usually at height. Mobile elevated work platform, MEWP, is the newest acronym used by the American National Standards Institute, ANSI. The MEWP standard expanded the definition of AWPs to include additional types of equipment. MEWPs, MEWPs come in a wide assortment of styles for various applications. These work platforms are commonly known as scissor lifts, aerial lifts, boom lifts, and vertical towers. Let's talk history. The history of elevated work platforms is a little murky and spotty. If there are any historians out there, this subject could use some research and documentation. Some of the history contained in this episode was derived from the book The Life and Legacy of John L. Grove. In the 1920s, automobiles in Sweden were outfitted with hydraulic lifts to allow for easier streetlight repairs. Charles Larson received a patent for his scissor lift design in 1963. As it happens with these things, who got there first is often in dispute. Although his patent was approved in 1966, Larson is not credited for inventing the scissor lift. John W. Parker of California is credited with the invention. One day, while on a road trip, John L. Grove saw 2 workers on scaffolding get severely injured. This event sparked an idea. There must be a safer way to perform elevated maintenance and construction work. John became a pioneer in introducing aerials and cranes into the marketplace. He co-founded Grove Manufacturing in 1946 and launched a line of hydraulic cranes for the commercial market in 1952. In 1967, Mr. Grove sold the company. 2 years later, he founded JLG Industries to manufacture aerial work platforms. Because John was well known as a pioneer, inventor, and great businessman, he's often credited with inventing the aerial work platform. However, before Grove's first model, a company named Selma Manlift introduced a model in 1966. The first machine produced by JLG was the Condor, and some called it a hydraulic ladder. The unit had a 2-section boom with a maximum height above grade of 27 feet. Using controls at the end of the telescopic boom had never been done before. According to John, it took only a few months to solve that problem. JLG amassed over 60 patents. Mr. Grove led the company until his retirement in 1993. Let's talk statistics. Between 2011 and 2014, 1,380 workers were injured while operating an aerial or scissor lift. 360 of those injuries resulted from slips, trips, and falls from one level to another. During the same period, 87 workers died while operating an aerial or scissor lift. 48 of those deaths resulted from slips, trips, and falls from one level to another. Let's talk safety. Safety tip number 1, pre-start inspection. Before each work shift, conduct a pre-start inspection to verify it's in safe operating condition. Follow the manufacturer's recommendations. Check vehicle components, including proper fluid levels, oil, hydraulic, fuel, and coolant, fluid leaks, wheels and tires, battery and charger, low-level controls, horn, gauges, lights, and backup alarms, steering, and brakes. Check the lift components, including operating and emergency controls, personal protective devices, hydraulic, air, pneumatic, fuel, and electrical systems, fiberglass and other insulating components, missing or unreadable placards, warnings, or operational, instructional, and control markings, mechanical fasteners and locking pins, cable and wiring harnesses, outriggers, stabilizers, and other structures, loose or missing parts, guardrail systems. Do not operate any aerial lift if any of these components are defective until a qualified person repairs it. Take faulty aerial lifts out of service. Safety tip number 2, know the hazards associated with MEWPs. The following hazards, among others, can lead to personal injury or death. Fall from an elevated level, objects falling from lifts, tip-overs, ejections from the lift platform, structural failures, collapses, electrocutions, entanglement hazards, contact with objects, contact with ceilings and other objects overhead. Safety tip number 3, site risk assessment. Employers must ensure that work zones are inspected for hazards and take corrective actions to eliminate such hazards before and during the operation of an aerial lift or MEWP. Items to look for include drop-offs, holes, or unstable surfaces such as loose dirt, inadequate ceiling heights, slopes, ditches, or bumps, debris and floor obstructions, overhead electric power lines and communication cables, other overhead obstructions, other hazardous locations and atmospheres, high wind and other severe weather conditions such as ice, the presence of others in the work area. Safety tip number 4, overhead protection. Remember the following. Be consciously aware of overhead clearance and overhead objects, such as ceilings. Do not position aerial lifts between overhead hazards if possible. Treat all overhead power lines and communication cables as energized and stay at least 10 feet away. Ensure that the power utility or power line workers de-energize power lines in the vicinity of the work. Safety tip number 5, training. Only trained and authorized persons should be allowed to operate an aerial lift. Training should include explanations of electrical, fall, and falling object hazards, procedures for dealing with hazards, recognizing and avoiding unsafe conditions, instructions for the correct operation of the lift, including maximum intended load and load capacity, demonstrations of the skills and knowledge needed to operate an aerial lift safely, when and how to perform inspections, and the manufacturer's requirements. Retraining. Workers should be retrained if any of the following conditions occur. An accident occurs during aerial lift use, workplace hazards involving an aerial lift are discovered, or a different type of aerial lift is used. Employers must also retrain workers who they observe operating an aerial lift improperly. Safety tip number 6, operation, traveling, loading. Folks, basically a laundry list of do nots. So here we go. Do not exceed the load capacity limits. Take the combined weight of the workers, tools, and materials into account when calculating the load. Do not use the aerial lift as a crane. Carry objects larger than the platform. Drive with the lift platform raised, unless the manufacturer's instructions allow this. Operate lower level controls unless you have permission from the worker in the lift. An obvious exception is during emergencies. Do not exceed vertical or horizontal reach limits. Do not operate an aerial lift in high winds above those recommended by the manufacturer, or override hydraulic, mechanical, or electrical safety devices. Following these tips could save you from accidents, injuries, and even death. Thanks for listening to another episode of Let's Not Die Today. If you love the show, please support us. Subscribe on Spotify, YouTube, or Apple Podcast. If you'd like free PDF versions of all our talks, go to our homepage, scroll down about halfway, and sign up for our mailing list. As always, thanks for listening, and see you next time.